The mid-morning talk show with Najma Khota. This is our Ramadan edition, alhamdulillah. And I just want to elaborate a little more on the introduction of the series that we'll be presenting to you on this very program every Tuesday mornings between 11 and 1 o'clock South African time. It is, of course, glorifying the past and uplifting our spirits in the sense that we have this past glory that we can learn from, because history teaches us. But also at the same time, we're looking at how we reflect on the state of Muslims currently globally on the global stage, and what is it that how have we risen, and why have we failed. And we look at the lessons from the great leaders from the past. So when we speak about the Ottoman Empire and the largest empire in history, then we're going to select a few of our great emperors from there, and what was it that led to their rise, and of course their fall. And tying into that is the Ashara Mubashara. Now we know that the first Caliphate of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and then the second of Umar bin al-Khattab were the founders and the militants, the strategists, the intellects, the faithful, the spiritual, that in fact built the basis for future great empires. So we draw lessons from both of these so that we can improve our state, inshallah ta'ala, via the information on this program. I do know we have very, very little time to cover such a vast topic, but we're going to use and capitalize on the knowledge of our guests. And today I am very pleased to invite our very special guest, Brother Hassen Valley, who is a self-published author whom I've introduced in my introduction of the program. So we welcome Brother Hassen. You are live on air. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakah to the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings to the people of South Africa. And we ask them to remember in this day the people and the suffering of the people of Gaza, that even in their moments that they can remember them, it will be a great honor and boon to them on the day when we face them before the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. So let's introduce our topic today, and we're talking about the Ottoman Empire. But before we do that, it's important for us to give some context to why we've chosen this particular empire. And, there's just a chronology, the summary of events that led up to the Ottoman state. Now, when you do this, I know you're going to have to condense it quite a bit, but go ahead and give us a summary, please.
Look, we are living in the time where history seems to be something, a glory of the past. And, it's a saying that those that don't know their history have condemned their future. And they say if a child is born and doesn't know his parents, then he will always remain a child. So for us, something very strong and relevant is about heritage and legacy. And I mean, in South Africa too, we try to appreciate. We have a legacy of 350 years of Muslims in this country. And our legacy is very rich. Unfortunately, we don't know. And by knowing that legacy, we appreciate one another and we appreciate the diversity, the country that we're living. And same thing in the world. Allah created creation all in one, and every soul that is on this earth that has been here and that will come has a special gift from Allah. And we use a very simple term. We call it a GPS, right? Allah's given them a GPS which is called the fitra, and this fitra eventually brings them home. They will find. So when we get people coming to Islam, they are not really, converting or whatever it is, but they are reverting. They're coming back to the original essence, their true self. So
Right.
In this world of diversity, we're looking at what is happening in Palestine. We're looking at what's Turkey celebrating over almost 100 years after the Khilafat 1923 when it was taken. What was the reason that it was taken? We go back very far in history. We look around about 1,000 years during the time of Salahuddin Ayyubi. We look at the time
Mm-hmm.
the first, second, and the third crusades came. And then we talk about the birth of these people that came right from the steppes of Russia, moved across, conquering and moving and settling handful of people, and then growing to a mighty empire, as we call the Ottoman Empire, that had a glory for a very long time. And in the West now, I'm using that within commas because there's no more West now. It's we're all one now. Whether we're East or West, there are Muslims everywhere in the world. There are human beings everywhere. We associate with them. We can use the word Eurocentric or secular. When they came out, they had this fear of the rising of the Turks or the coming of the Turks. It's a bad phrase, but they always say the coming of the Turks are coming. It's always been used. Even movies have used it to say something horrible is coming, but it was liberation.
Hmm. Hmm.
Anything you want to add to that, my dear?
Well, I think we need to go back to the history. We are focused on the history of the empire. So we need to, if you can please give us the chronology or a summary of events that led up to the Ottoman empires. So if we're looking at from, the Umayyads, the Abbasids, and so on and so forth, until the Ottomans came into power, and how did this empire start?
Look, what is very interesting is that the glorious days of Islam, as the Prophet ﷺ said, was just about a short period of 20 years, the time of the four Khilafat Rashidin. All right? Now, people must also appreciate, and we have to appreciate, that Muslim is made from a whole network. The tapestry of Islam is from a very mixed people of the world, different cultures, different people came in. We had from there, we had Hazrat Bilal radiallahu anhu from Abyssinia, we had Suhail from Rome, we had Salman from Farsi, and like this is made up. So in that different diversity, we have today what we call the unity. So Turkey, and it's coming to that point after the Khilafah Rashidin, the Muslim empire went to the Abbasid rule, the Umayyad rule, and it came to a point where then other ideologies crept in, and while the Muslims have contributed a great part of it. Now let's look at the coming of the, the light from the darkness of the Cathay, that is the Chinese uh, empire, where there was still darkness. And in there, among the steppes, we had the Mughals, the people that were there, and they were a different kind of people. Nothing happened to them. They were warring people. But on the other side, we had now the rise of the Ottomans coming, and also we don't forget that one survivor of the Umayyads went and found himself landing up in so-called Spain, and that was the birth of the Muslim Empire in Spain, which was the glory of Islam. It was in that years of enlightenment that Islam contributed to what we would call the jump starting of the Renaissance. So we have that empire coming, which for a very long time carried on until 1492 and every day after later, when Isabella of Spain, they made all the effort to remove the Muslims. And I'm talking, now why I bring this about that when the Muslims entered into a place, they brought legacy, they brought wealth, they brought richness, they brought education, they brought knowledge, and they brought freedom. People were freed. People were never coerced into Islam. They had the freedom of the choice, but they were free to practice. So in the heart and the mind of Muslim conquest, it was always that humanity. And Muslims had a very simple rule. They called a text called jizya, and this text was protection. That as long as we're there in your midst, we will look after you, and you will pay a tax so that at least it will fund the army that is looking after you, and you will be free to engage in your own worship and your own culture in the way you. We don't interfere with you, and you don't interfere with our faith.
Right.
And this was
But
the beauty
before,
part of Islam.
right. But before we go into what led to their success and what led to their rise, what led to their establishment, these were the Turks, the regions they came from were basically nomads and established themselves. And when they did establish themselves, there was a bureaucracy that they are known for to this day that got them a place where they were grounded. They were now setting up a state. So they introduced taxes, they introduced a bureaucratic system. But before that, we see that the Abbasids and the Umayyads, also had their glory years. And then came the Ottomans. Now, it was about conquering, it was about establishing states. But Islamic states. So we have to look at that in terms of the history that I'm looking for in
Right.
this
Now,
question.
right. Now you got your Islamic states coming. Now let you have to go back, right? You have to take the time of the Abbasides in the rule, right? During the time, let's take Hazrat
Yeah,
Umar radiallahu anhu, right?
right. But
Great
without going
man.
into, yes,
No,
yes,
no, we're not
without
going. We
going
just
into
want to
too
touch.
much
Let's take the
detail.
wealth from there. So Hazrat
Yes.
Umar gives us one of the greatest wealth is how to administer and how to run a country in terms of the wealth, the coinage, the infrastructure of economics, the sharing, the waterworks, all those things. And look at the beauty of Islam. He did not know that, and he took that knowledge from people elsewhere. So he incorporated all this. So Islam, there wasn't a closed shop. Whoever had the knowledge, Islam shared and took the goodness out of it. Now, right, that goes right up. Now, here you get a handful of people who come from the steppes of Russia. You get these little Ottomans coming in, and they are now a handful of people. And then later, they are engaging with the Crusaders who are already there. They've got Constantinople, and then you have the Mughals coming in there, and they were a very destructive nation. They come into their history where Genghis Khan and his hordes totally wipe out Islam to a point where there is now a destruction. What has happened
Right.
is because these tribes came in, and the Muslims then also became very complicit and contented with what they had, and they forgot the power of what was coming, and this was the Mughal hordes, and they actually destroyed the Muslim empire as far as Damascus and Basra was concerned. Now,
Hmm.
again, during that demise, there's something great comes out of it because this is now we cannot associate our politics from Islam. Allah has ways and wisdom of doing things. Like today, presently, people are going to ask the question, what is happening in Palestine? Where is Allah in the equation? Same thing, what happened in the time when the hordes of the Genghis Khan came into Damascus and they were destroying and killing. The people were worried, what was happening? And this thing is important. It becomes self-reflective. People had to
Hmm.
look within themselves. Where did they go off the mark? What did they do? What were the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ that they may have abandoned on the way, that Allah is now testing them? And the thing that gave rise to the Ottoman was also what was the demise. The Mughals that came and conquered the Muslims in Damascus, their grandchildren, Genghis Khan's grandchild, Hulugu, and all those, they then embraced Islam. So the very
Hmm.
people that conquered Islam became the defenders of Islam.
Alhamdulillah.
And then mixing, then we get the rise of the small group of people, the small group of Osmanis, the small people of the Turks, and that tribe grew. And eventually we get to a time, let's go even to up to 1453, when we had
Right.
this young boy by the name of Fatih, Mahmud Fatih, where he is ordained to conquer Istanbul.
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
is the moment where Islam just bursts open, and you see the Ottoman Empire rising. The the taking of Istanbul was an impregnable, never thought in history that that could be taken,
Yes,
right?
Constantinople was impenetrable. Yes, and no
But
matter how
and
many tried to conquer. Yeah,
and
yeah.
and, and it was in there. But there was a prophecy of the Prophet ﷺ that there will come a time when somebody, and this young man took it upon him. He was very young, right? He was not schooled, not experienced, but
14.
he had something very good about him. He had a wazir, he had somebody who was a spiritual guide, and he took
Hmm.
lessons from him. And this young boy put his trust into the Creator Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he worked
Exactly.
with him that way. And he built the resilience and he had the determination and he did everything. But he was a conqueror, but he was not a brutal murderer. He didn't raise a country or use the scorched earth policy where they would burn everything. He left the people. He was actually a liberator, not only for the Muslims, but the liberator of the people that were in Constantinople. So
Right.
Constantinople then grew out to become a mushroom, a beauty of Jews and Christians and Muslims all interacting together. Muslims in their faith, and these people were free to practice what they. And the people, believe me, even the Jewish tribes, the Jews that were there, they remained there. They were given the right of their own language and their own priest and their own rabbinical laws. They could rule by that as long as it did not interfere with the Muslims. So they grew in stature and they held top positions in the Ottoman Empire, where they became leaders of certain principals and municipalities and became advisors. So likewise, Christian, all that. But again, comes back to Fatih Mahmud, young boy,
Mhm.
1453. Then breaks the impregnable walls. It's a long story how he takes that. But the question is, when he enters Istanbul, he does not enter as a conqueror. He enters as
Hmm.
a liberator. He
Hmm.
destroys nothing. The streets are
Correct.
filled with people with fear, but he does not take life. And he
Hmm.
gives them the promise that as long as they stay there, as the Amir, he will look after them. And that is the beauty of Islam, and that is what kept Islam empires together. And that was
Right.
the fear for conquerors outside. That was the fear for all those that were fighting Islam, that they couldn't. Now, let's go back to, let's say, Aqsa, which is also part of the conquest of Istanbul, where the
Mm.
era of Salahuddin Ayyubi, right? Salahuddin Ayyubi is in the time of the Seljuks, right?
Right.
Sultan Malik. And there are rumors, some say that he adopted him, some say that he raised him as a child, but he comes from a Kurdi upbringing family. And he grew up in that palace and groomed. And then after that, he takes over leadership. But what does he do? In that time, when also the Mongols are coming, the only strong fort that Islam had was in Egypt. But Egypt was controlled by the Fatimites, and these were a Shia group of people, and most of them had what they called slaves that became leaders, right? They were raised as slaves, and then they then uplifted themselves, and then they became like bodyguards, and eventually the Fatimites they took over the country. But the astute of Salahuddin Ayyubi, that he went in there and he won the hearts of those people, that his army to bring out the collapse of Palestine or the Aqsa was these people that support him. And when he took over, when he went in and he conquered Masjid al-Aqsa, it was not the same type of conquering that is in the recorded in the history of the Persian time. Nabotsukar, when he came in, he massacred everybody that's there. When the Crusades came in, it was a picnic. It's a shame what they did. Babies were stewed and were eaten by these so-called liberators of God with their big crosses on their chest coming to liberate. And they killed Christians,
So
Muslims,
now,
and Jews.
yeah,
Yes, my
is
dear.
this? Are we still following the Ottoman
Yes,
reign?
this is
Yes, this was
all
during the
that
Ottoman.
leads up to that point. So
Right.
Salahuddin liberates that. Now we look back how the Ottomans have moved, and when they came into power, right? They moved in, and wherever they went, they liberated people. So we had lots of places, the Balkan states, and went down east and down into Saudi and into Africa and Egypt, and there. So we had the Ottoman rule, but there was a problem with the Ottoman rule. It could not survive. Why?
Okay, now
Because the
before
British.
before we get into that, I just want to go a bit more deeper into how what led to their power,
All right.
apart from what you said in terms of their them being liberators rather than conquerors. What I found very interesting is that one of the sultans also, because there was, so they were a very powerful force at the time, conquering. So the enemy feared them, but there was also this dispute between the Muslims within the Muslim
Look,
sects. So
look,
now correct me if I'm wrong
yeah.
here, but what they did was, which I found incredibly amazing, and that's what led to their great army that they had, and that is the fact that they took young boys from Christian faith and groomed them in their palaces. They got the best education. They got the best. They lived in the palace. They were trained for archery, and at the time, we know that they were also very strong army with cannons and that, which is something they developed. So what they did was they did away. They didn't focus so much on the division that was caused, that could have fragmented the empire. They used this force, and that's how they became the strongest army. So if we
Yeah.
look at that, I want you to focus a little
All
more
right. Now, if
on
you, if
that,
you take that
on
now, yeah.
the
All right.
influence
Well,
that
let's look
what
at that part.
yeah.
This was not a forced thing. So what happened is that remember the empire is growing, right? And as the empire grows, the Muslims did one thing. Where if they took jizya, they had to give protection. So they needed a standing army, right? Now this is an army or not mercenaries. That means these people weren't paid to kill, right? These were people that were paid to protect the people that they lived or that they conquered. So Muslims had a standing army, and they needed more soldiers. So what they used to do, wherever they took, they never would do like the others. They would rape the women, kidnap the women, and take the children and bring them. They brought them up into their own institutions, schooled them, gave them education, and then gave them the choice of accepting the deen, right? So there's a bit of a debate on that. But they then came in and they were happy with it. And they had a chance to go back, but even their families were happy because what happens, they give the families some security. They also benefit from. So like this, they went in and these people came in and they were able to move also in the places where they conquered, right? And they were able to protect those people. So the Muslims were strong in the sense that the people were for a purpose. But don't forget, behind all this, that the principle that governed the success of Muslims was the Quran, right?
Hmm.
They
And,
were not there to enact pain and suffering and abuse, although that may have come in afterwards. The moment we went off the Quran, we had our issues. But while the success of the Ottoman Empire was growing, it was growing also. But remember that while in Europe, they were not sitting still. They were also looking very seriously of how to bring about the destruction. And this was
yes.
planned from the first, second, and third
So,
crusades.
so before we go into that, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We need
Yeah,
to go for a break, and then we're going to look at after the break, please. How did they rise from a frontier principality to an empire? We're still
right.
focused on the building of an empire.
I'll give you that. No problem.
Okay,
Thank you for guiding. It's a big topic.
I know, I know.
This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
Fulfill your zakat conveniently with Ashraful Aid. This Ramadan, let's make your zakat count. Ashraful Aid's zakat distribution is carefully overseen by external boards which ensure its transparency and trust. Make a difference to those who really need it. Join us today to spread hope and compassion to those who need it most. Visit our www.ashrafulaid.org.
Freedom Stationery supply Marlin and Marlin Kids pens to me and my school friends. They supply just about everything we need to help us get a better education, from books to files to rulers. In fact, any any accessory we need. Freedom Stationery. Education for the nation. What does accessory mean?
Join African Muslims Agency to make an impact that goes beyond the opportunities. Every
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and free zakat calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
Salam Media, your spiritual companion this Ramadan.
We're back with our very special guest, Hassen Valley. We are unpacking the history of the Ottoman Empire, the rise and fall. This is the first part in our series of the Muslim empires. this week and next week we'll be covering the Ottoman Empire, and then inshallah the following 2 Tuesdays we'll cover the Mughal empires. So before the break I was asking you to talk about how they rose, the Ottoman. How did they rise from a frontier principality to an empire? Because I know it's difficult to condense all of it into this little bit of time that we have, but I need to focus a lot on that historical triumph as such.
You see, a historical time also is not subjective to one happening. There's always a lot of things
Correct.
around. And I think the most important thing is we look at about 1071, there was a great Islamic hero that came about. I don't know whether you've heard of the name. His name was called the heroic lion Alp Arslan. Now,
Mhm.
Alp Arslan was a Seljuk, and Seljuks came in and they're very powerful people that time. So what
Mhm.
happened is there was infighting between the Ottomans and the Seljuks, and there were also collaboration until such time that the Ottomans then took over and the Seljuks became part of them. But in that equation, remember that they were the Crusades, and the Crusades were making trouble. So they were buying, bribing, doing everything else. So amidst all that was going, the Seljuk Empire, and then there was a very powerful battle. And this battle was between Romanus Diogenes, who was the emperor of Constantinople at that time, and it was called the Battle of Manzikert, right? So Manzikert was a very strong battle, and Europe put all the efforts in that they would defeat the Ottomans or the Seljuks. And unfortunately for them, the Muslims became victorious, and that actually sent Romus Diogenes out of there. And this was one of the beginning of the collapse of there. So the Muslims were now consolidating. Now the Ottomans were small tribes. So as they started conquering and winning the little principalities like the place called Aleppo, which is called Alp, Damascus, then places like Baghdad, all into so that they could now consolidate, and then with naturally the main the prize, the trophy was Gaza. And when they took all that, then the Ottoman Empire started now moving in, and then they started closing in, and then finally with the taking of Istanbul, they had now a place, right? But the first Khilafat was not Constantinople; it was a place called, it was an island uh, in Turkey out where they controlled from. Then he went to Ankara, and then finally back to Istanbul. So they consolidated that power, but that power was always being contested from Europe. So it's a long story, but we see the
Mm.
rise of the Ottoman Empire. But also we must remember that their strength was not only military, was economic.
Yes,
And I think that
yes. They
scholars
were
don't want to, yeah, it's economic,
Mhm.
very important. Scholars don't want to go deep into it because this is very intricate. And I wanted just to remind you, if you remember the book called Romeo and Juliet, right? In
Yeah.
Romeo and Juliet, we have the merchant called Antonio. And
Mhm.
Antonio's ships are gone east. They don't tell you where. Shakespeare is very smart, but he went to buy merchants, and they get rumors that the ships were sinking. Right? Okay. Let's give you some Islamic perspective and background onto that. So, what happens now in Turkey? In order to consolidate the strength and able to control the money and to control greed and hoarding and all that, they introduced a system called the guild. And this is very important, very relative to today that we
Mhm.
can look into. Now, the guild was controlled by the ulama. So it is like an organization. So what
Mhm.
happens now? The ulama had the guild and all the finances were controlled there. So they would go to the farmer, and the farmer would produce the cotton, and they would buy the cotton and take it to the mills. So the farmer gets paid, and the cotton is sold direct to the mills. And the mills would then process that cotton into what we need is pure cotton, right? And then that cotton is then sold to the merchants, and the mills would be paid. The merchants would then use it, and they would make fabrics, whatever it is out of it, and they would get paid, and then that would be exported to all the lands that the Ottomans controlled, right? So it will go as far as deep into Europe and everywhere else. And this was their backbone. So
Mhm.
they said, if we collapse the guild system, then you will collapse the empire. It was not war.
Right.
Scholars don't know, it was not war. Because they were there.
Mhm.
So the guild system, so what happened is that eventually, again, greed is a funny thing. So the merchants like Antonio from Shakespeare, they all got into Turkey and they started buying cotton directly. at a black market price, at a bartering price. The highest bidder got the cotton, and they smuggled the cotton back into Europe, processed it, made the material like the British have been doing all over the colonials, their legacy. They take out the raw material from the countries, and then they take it to their countries, they exploit it, and they bring it back. You know about India, you know about Kashmir, you know about South Africa, you know about Zimbabwe, you know about what's happened at the top of Africa. So the same story is there, but we haven't found. Because why? The politics, the people in power is the economy. So this is what happened. So Europe slowly dismantled. And now when the guilt was there was no money. The merchants
Right.
couldn't get paid. There was no
Okay.
people
So,
manufacturing, and the ulama collapsed, and the people in power
right, but
got no
now,
money.
before we go into the fall of the empire, which I'm going to reserve for the end of next week's program,
No problem.
inshallah.
This is just a
Uh,
touch, it's just an
yeah,
idea.
just yes, certainly, I appreciate that, but also we have to unpack, and there isn't time now. We're just about ending this
All right.
interview now, but the fact that they were one of the largest empires in history, and their power that you touched on, I know you did, and what led to it, but of course, what was Islam's influence in the rise of the Ottoman Empire, and that we're going to unpack in our following program, inshallah, next week Tuesday.
All right.
Is there
So let's sum it up. Look, remember, behind all this is Islam, right? Islam is the rise of it, right? And the destruction is also Islam, because when we left Islam and we abandoned the ways of the Prophet ﷺ, then brought
Sallallahu
out
Alaihi
this
Wasallam?
word. So Islam
Indeed,
is the key word, right? Okay.
right, and then the
The
lessons
Muslims
that
had
we
power
draw.
because it was the Quran, right? Their strength was in Allah. Their trust was
Okay,
Allah. So, okay.
yeah, sorry, Brother Hassan. We're going
No,
to reserve that discussion for our
no
next
problem. We can get on that.
program.
Yeah. Right.
Yes, inshallah. We really, really appreciate your time. I know we got you at the 11th hour, and for you to cover a topic this vast is very intense and difficult, but you've done your best, and we really appreciate it. So, inshallah, we look forward to our next episode of the Ottoman Empire, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. I think what we've done, we've created interest in the viewers. They will now have this, what do you call it, a kachuma, a whole different day, and try to make sense of it, which is very important. So we'll get our viewers thinking and maybe doing their own research. And inshallah, next week we'll have a more guided way of continuing with this, because now we know what we're looking for. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Indeed. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All right, when we come back, inshallah, we will be talking about the Ashara Mubashara, the 10 companions who were given the glad tidings of Jannah by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of course, the first two that we'll be talking about is Hazrat Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh and Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu anh. These were gigantic, majestic caliphs and leaders of the time. And we draw from lessons from it, and we take the history, and we hope that we can engage in something that's going to initiate some type of inspiration that's going to take us back to that principle and those principles that they built Islamic empires on. I'll be right back after this break.